The 7 dimensions of ABA. Applied. So skills that we teach should be based on functionality. It should be useful and make improvements to the overall well-being of our students and families. A very good example would be to teach saying thank you versus manding. In the case of a student with weak verbal communication skills, we need to consider several things. When we teach someone to say thank you, it is a social skill. It is something that we say when someone does something nice for us, right? And when we do say thank you, although we're not expecting anything back, but what we do get back most of the time is very subtle, social significant, replies. You get a little bit of acknowledgement, if you will. Now, if you think about it, we ourselves, when we say it, we're not quite aware of it most of the time that we do get something like that back. And when you have a student who's weak with social skills or weak with verbal communication skills, they may not even be aware that this is taking place. Whereas if you're teaching manding, manding is when you request for something. And once you make your man, and let's say the request is fulfilled, or the object, the toy, the drink is delivered, you're receiving some instant gratification. You're instantly satisfied by your behavior. Therefore, when I'm teaching verbal skills, I need to consider based on my students' needs. So it's applicable. Um, Looking at behavior has to be observable. In a classroom setting, if a teacher is asking a question to the general class, the student may shout out an answer, and that's something that we can observe in in response to the question. Now, of course, then at that point, when you think about what can we teach them, number one, the easiest thing to do is when the teacher asks you a question, you should raise your hand to answer. So that's something that we can observe. At the same time, we can also think about, what else should you do instead of raising your hands? You may need to wait your turn. You may need to be quiet. These are all observable events, observable behaviors. When we talk about behaviors that we can observe, we're often looking at frequency, how often it's happening, or the intensity, how how heavy something is, if you will, how much behavior is taking place. ABA is technological. ABA is a technique. It is a step-by-step procedure, and it's exact. Meaning, when I deliver a plan to somebody, they should be able to replicate the same thing that I can based on the plan. It's almost like a cooking recipe, if you will. If I have a recipe for a chocolate cake, the ingredients, the steps should be exact, and the outcome should be relatively similar. If you take the same recipe of making a chocolate cake, you should deliver, at the end, pretty much the same thing. You wouldn't, certainly, one person might come out with a cake, and it's unlikely the other person would come out with a cookie. It may taste a little different, but it should be a cake. And that's ABA. You have a plan, you have a method, and you should have the same outcome. It shouldn't differ. It shouldn't be very different if you're sticking to the plan. And ABA is definitely analytical. Um, and we analyze what we do by reviewing data. So everything we do, we have to collect data on. And when we look at data, if an intervention being used is not showing a change or increase in the desirable behavior, then we need, change is warranted. We need to make changes to the plan. Once the intervention is modified and data shows that there's an increase in direct or desired direction, then we can prove a reliable relationship between our intervention and the increase of positive behavior. This definitely addresses the issue of believability. Everything we do should and can be rationalized. Why behaviors occur, what is being taught to make changes, and how skills taught having made positive changes. There's no magic bullet. What we do is definitely, we could back it up by the data we take. Um, Moving on. ABA is effective. Affects behavior intervention must be able to make improvements in personal lives, and we mentioned that earlier. And it should be about expanding their skills. It's definitely conceptually systematic. what we do should relate back to different systems and principles. For example, ABA, we're relying on discrete trial training, the ABC three-term contingencies. We're using reinforcement, and we're definitely, we're behavior intervention. We're using all these different concepts. And looking at generalization, um, everything we teach, right? We're teaching maybe initially in a very controlled environment, but what we teach should definitely maintain and sustain across time, meaning it wouldn't fade out just because you stop practicing. At the same time, it should be transferable to different environments. So if I'm teaching a student in a classroom or in a learning center in a one-to-one, very structured setting, I'm expect I'm expecting once these skills are mastered, that they're able to carry these back out to different environments of their lives. It could be at home, it could be at school, and it could be just out in general social settings. So everything we teach should be generalizable.